Well, Hubbard Street. Um, I remember my first. I remember my first excursions down Hubbard Street. They happened after I went to high school in a different town from the one I lived in. We lived in Lincoln, and Lincoln didn't have a high school, so we went to Concord High School. And Concord High School was pretty much on pretty near the intersection of Hubbard and Stowe. And so in order to get downtown, we'd have to walk on Hubbard Street, and we walked right past the house that I spent 47 years in. I remember being annoyed about the fact that it had a huge, huge hedge that hung over the sidewalk, so that when you walked down, you had to be careful that the hedge didn't pick at your clothes or your hair or something. Anyway, I don't know. But that was my first impression of Hubbard Street. I had no idea that that's where I was going to live after Bill and I were married, and after he had gone back to school, and he was determined then to become a photographer. And we moved into Hubbard Street not long after we returned to Concord. I think we lived with his mother and father for a while, which was always fun. The farm was a great place to be. But then we moved to Hubbard Street, and we moved into the smaller side. Bill's sister was living in the larger side. She had a bigger family. And so here was this great neoclassical house that had been built sometime in the 1880s, I would guess. I know that Bill's grandfather bought it somewhere around 1890. I may be completely wrong about that date, but I think it was somewhere in that vicinity. And it had a water heater in the kitchen, and it hadn't had anything significantly done to it for a good many years. And over the years that we lived there, we slowly did renovate it, according to how our finances improved. And I believe that by the time when we moved there, we already had Ken and Bill, and they probably were about 3 and 2 when we moved there. And Pook came along a couple of years later, and then 4 years after Pook, her sister Libby came along. And it was actually a super wonderful place to bring up children. First of all, the house had an extra piece of land behind the carriage house, and that piece of land was Bill's father got that piece of land attached to his property because the person who owned the piece of land on the far side of the block owed him a lot of money for groceries during the Depression, and just settled the whole bill by giving this great, huge, well, I mean, I would say maybe a half an acre lot behind the carriage house. Wonderful place for the kids as they grew up. That just used for every possible thing, games and huge parties every 4th of July, and it was a great experience. It was also wonderful to live so close to town. We were about a half a block away from downtown, and it had its hazards. On any number of occasions, either Kenny or Bill would break out and go downtown when they certainly weren't supposed to be. The first time Kenny did it, the fire station, the guys at the fire station took him down to Snow's Pharmacy, which had an ice cream counter, and bought him an ice cream cone, and no wonder he got away as often as he possibly could. And one time, I remember I was doing making beds upstairs and thinking that the boys were in the backyard. We had a great fenced-in backyard provided by my Aunt Louise, who loved my kids dearly, and they loved her. And she bought the she had a fence built so that they could be safely contained in the backyard. And of course, the little monsters found ways of getting out. And I looked out the window, and here's Bessie Holden, who lived next door to us and was an old maid of the 19th century type, coming down the sidewalk with the boys on each hand, stark naked. So it must have been quite an experience for Bessie as well as for me. Cut for a minute. You still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so that's where we lived all the time that our children were going to school. And Bill was just, all Bill had to do was walk half a block to work. Half a block all the way around, excuse me. He went down to Walden Street and then another half a block to his camera shop. And that was wonderful for him because he could get home every day for lunch. As the kids got older and took up less and less of my time, I found more and more ways to add to the family coffers. I did everything I could possibly do. Housebound as I was, I cooked, I catered a little bit, I sewed, I made pies for Anderson's Market, and then as the children got older and were more reliable, I took on work as an assistant to an accountant, because if there was one thing I could handle, it was numbers, without too much background, education. I should say right here that Bill and I got married in 1945. Because the war had gotten to the point where it was moving to the Pacific, and he was probably going to the Pacific, and we thought we should get married before any dire things might happen. And by that time I had very little college. I quit college, and he had just a year. So when he finally did get out, he went back to Mass State for a while, and that lasted long enough for him to realize he did not want to be in pre-med. He wanted to be a photographer, and the reason he found that out was because he was taking photographs all over the campus and at campus events to add to our income. So that was the reason why he finally gave up. And that's actually after he came back from there that we actually moved to Hubbard Street. And he started his photo business, first of all, in a little loft up over Anderson's Market, and then eventually in a nice camera shop of his own on Walden Street, just, as I say, right around the corner. And as the children got older and older, and more responsible and more able to take care of themselves, I took on more and more different kinds of jobs. As I say, first of all, as a bookkeeper, and then eventually eventually was offered a job at Brandeis University. And the nice part about that was that I was going to Brandeis University at that time. Now, by this time, of course, the kids were all older and all able to take care of themselves. Some of them were in college. And so I had started to take courses at college so I could keep up with the little monsters who used to argue me into corners periodically. And then one day, in just sheer good luck, they had a change of presidents at Brandeis, and somebody got me an interview with an incoming executive vice president, and I was really shocked. I have to admit, I was totally shocked when I got the job, earning more money than I'd ever earned before in my life, and just absolutely thrilled. And I was at Brandeis, I can't think how many years, but at least until 1995, and I think maybe I was there something like 19 years, and during that time, Bill came down with cancer, and although he lived a fairly normal life for about 5 years after the onset of the cancer, it eventually caught up with him and killed him, which was a shame. He was a great guy. We had done a little bit of traveling before he died. We'd been to both Norway, which is where his grandfather and grandmother were born, and we had also gone to Italy with his friend John Wood and wife, and had a wonderful time there, and also a hiking trip to England. Now, this, in looking back, I'm in a state of shock about it, because he vowed that he would never go traveling. That wasn't his style at all. But we had great times. Once we got him on the plane, he would stop grumbling and accept his fate. But we did do a certain amount of traveling before he got so sick he couldn't do it.